By way of introduction, my name is Lisa Salazar Tingy, and I'm one of the women behind MWEG's Hope Experiment, the initiative that brought us all together tonight. I'm calling in from Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm thrilled to be hosting. So for those who are joining us for the first time, MWEG is short for Mormon Women for Ethical Government. We are a grassroots movement of thousands of women across 49 states who are working to build a more peaceful, just, and ethical world. MWEG is a faith-based and nonpartisan organization with a two-part mission. We advocate for ethical governments, and we help women become independent and powerful civic actors. So in short, we work together to make things better. And as part of this mission, we launched a social experiment this summer to prepare our members for the upcoming election season. We asked participants to take stock of how hopeful they were feeling, and then gave them a simple list of actions they could take to create a deeper, more lasting hope. Why did we do that? Because democracies thrive when citizens are engaged, optimistic, and hopeful for the future. When we feel despairing and cynical, we're much less motivated to work together for our own benefit and the benefit of others. So at the outset of this program, we asked participants to share what they were hoping to gain from the experiment. And the responses varied, but overwhelmingly, women said that they were looking for connection and community and a sense of security. Often their despair stemmed from fractures in relationships that have been damaged by our polarized political environment. Many of us are still reeling from confrontations and heated exchanges that we've had with loved ones back in 2020 or even 2016. And that is at the core of much of the despair and apathy that people now feel around politics and honestly in community and surrounding community in general. So we know personally how hard this is to overcome. So we knew we had to bring in one of the very best to help us navigate it together. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Finlayson-Fife. She really doesn't need much of an introduction, but she's a well-respected relationship and sexuality coach with a PhD in counseling psychology. She teaches online personal and sexual development courses and is the host of Room for Two, a popular sex and intimacy podcast. Most importantly, she understands how important communication is to human connection. And tonight she's here to help us heal our relationships. But now I'll turn the time over to Dr. Finlayson-Fife.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Lisa and MWEG. I really respect your mission and what you're doing, and well, especially on this topic of hope, because it is so easy in our current environment to feel despair, to feel a sense of futility, to feel like we can't really make a difference. And as Lisa was saying, just this sense of division that's being driven right by the current political environment and has really created, a lot of, I think for many people, a sense of how can I make a difference? Feeling isolated, feeling despair. So anyway, human beings, right? We need community. We need very much to feel like we belong and that sense of cohesion, right? That we have a group that has our back, that cares about us. And, in what my basic position is or hope for tonight is to help you with this idea, which is that by doing something, right? By loving others, by doing what we can to create more good in the world, that diminishes our sense of futility. That diminishes our sense of despair. We really go into a sense of despair when we feel like everything is sort of acting upon us and that we can't do anything about it. You may not be able to get someone to understand you or to see the world the way you see it, but you can care about the basic humanity of the people around you in all of our differences. And caring about others will help your soul, not to mention help others' soul. And I just want to help us think through what's difficult about that and how we can do it. Human beings, we've always held diverse positions and diverse opinions about what matters, about how the world should operate. And this just comes out of our different cultures, our different lived experiences, our different gifts, our different biologies. And, much like the body of Christ metaphor, we're operating from different positions, even though we're all interconnected with one another. And, um, I think it's a Chinese metaphor, but this idea of, we're all touching different parts of that metaphorical elephant, right? And so each of us has experiences that matter. We're pointing to a larger truth. But as human beings, dealing with differences is always it's always, that's why my business thrives, okay? Is because dealing with differences is difficult, and never do you deal with them more than in a marriage, for example, or in a family. Um, and so differences, we are drawn to difference, we need difference, we need different perspectives, but they also can create strain and pain and interfere with our ability to collaborate and to work together. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is, because our natural man inclination, our egos, our sense of fear, control, it can really interfere with building a bridge of understanding. But the current information environment that we're in, as magnificent as it is, the internet has given us so many gifts, right? So many abilities to create more groups, to create, organizations like MWEG, right, are deeply benefit by the internet. For example, you can reach people in lots of different states all across the country. And so there are many, many strengths that have come with our new information environment, but there's also a lot of challenges that we haven't yet worked out the kinks around. And one of them is we can easily find reinforcement and interfere with our own ability to understand another perspective. The human brain loves reinforcement. We love it when we find someone who thinks the same way we do, who has had a very similar experience to us. We love it. It makes us feel like I'm not crazy. I have somebody who understands me. And what we tend to not like is when someone says, well, no, I have a very, very different perspective, a very different point of view. I actually think you're misguided in your perspective. That's really hard for us because it challenges our sense of self. It challenges our view of the world. With the internet, you can go find the group that is going to largely agree with you and close off all of the competing data, the perspectives, the ideas that will challenge your point of view. And when I was growing up back in the good old days, we had three channels, right? And three, basically reporting the same news more or less. Now we can easily, go find a news source that largely validates the perspective we already have. And when we are being kind of reinforced in the perspective we currently have, it literally dumbs us down. It makes us dumb. It makes us have too little data to really understand how to solve our problems, how to understand how other people that we need to collaborate and work together with understand the world. So again, it allows us that ego satisfaction, and we can easily look with disgust to people that think differently than us and just think like, how could they be so stupid? Like, how could they think that or believe that? And it seems dumb to us because we don't understand their experience. We don't yet understand why it does make sense to them. What is the view or the experience they've had that they see the world differently than we do? So, this vilification of others and kind of treating others as less than us or very different than us, like another, from another planet, another species, however we do that, it's both wrong, it is unloving, and it's indulgent, right? And it leads us to distrust each other and interferes with our ability to solve problems together, and it increases despair, right? It increases our sense of fear and aloneness. And as hard as it is to build bridges, our souls desperately need it. Our societies desperately need for us to do this. Um, and so if you just want to sort of think about this, like when you're mad at your spouse, okay, or if you're married, or you're mad at a sibling, right? It's really, really easy to go find a friend or someone who's like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I can't believe they said that, right? I mean, like that's where we want to go. Is like, can you no, I get and they said it, and then I said this really nice thing, and they said this really ridiculous thing. And we just love the reinforcement of it. What's much harder to do is to go to the person that we've had the disagreement with and understand how they see us. Why are they upset with us? What do they think is unfair in our position? Right? Because in doing that, we have to maybe take a different look at ourselves. We have to at least consider what another person's experience is of us, whether or not we agree with it. We have to at least look at what is the point of view that I don't yet have accounted for in my point of view. And oftentimes it leads us to see not just the person we're in conflict with differently, it leads us to see ourselves differently, and often pushes us out of some simpler point of view about who we are or about how the world works. And that growth is uncomfortable. That growth is hard, and we resist it. I teach this all the time, and I still resist it. I hate it, basically. I don't like feedback. I don't like hearing where I've gotten something wrong. It's always, disorganizing. And we love a validation, but we grow in invalidation often. We grow when the way we see the world is challenged by more truth. Okay. So, so in our current information environment, right, politicians and news organizations benefit at exploiting this inclination in us to want reinforcement, to not want complexity, right? And yet we have to remember that when we indulge it too much, we're making ourselves dumber, okay? We're limiting our ability to really solve problems. Einstein is purported to have said, you can't solve a problem at the level of intelligence in which the problem was created. You have to increase your intelligence to do it. You have to rise up in your functioning. The way we do that is with more truth, more perspective than what we currently have. And so it means we have to invite the perspectives that we want to dismiss, that we don't yet understand. Okay. So, so we don't have to agree with what others think, right? It doesn't mean like we have to see it the same way or we have to think the way they see it is the right way. But we have to, at a minimum, be careful not to reduce those who think differently than us to be unworthy or less, right? Now, this can be challenging because some ideas are dangerous, right? Sometimes people's ideals feel threatening to our sense of belonging in the group or our family. Sometimes they feel threatening to our own beliefs. And it can be hard, right, to hang on to our own sense of self or what is true if we feel bombarded by what we feel like are distorted ideas or deceptive ideas, right? So we don't have to agree, but I want us to think about how can we still reach across in the face of disagreeing or in the face of not sharing the same perspective. So I think what the gospel is about, what life and love fundamentally is about, and what it asks of us is to handle our differences without hatred. You can't say to another part of the body, I have no need of thee, right? That's not true. It's not loving. We have to hold on to the basic humanity in each other. And so we have to keep ourselves from reducing another soul, even if they think differently than we do. We can easily focus on the perceived crazy in another person's view and the perceived wisdom in our own. And and reject and judge others. This is very much natural, man. Even babies do this, right? There's research on this that babies will reject the teddy bear that likes different things than they like. We want that validation. But in doing this very human thing of reducing other people that think differently than we do, we go blind to them, we go blind to ourselves, and we go blind to the wisdom that we need in the other person's perspective. And we don't build a real connection to them and their humanity, right? I love the metaphor that the Christ taught, which is that we are focused on the mote in our in another's eye while not recognizing the beam in our own. And we think we can see clearly while we're literally blinded by it, and think that we are in a position to help them out with their mote, right? Have you ever been in a relationship where somebody is determined to get you to think the right way, to think the way they think, and they're doing that through argument or manipulation? Um, um, I had a friend who they decided to leave the church. She and her husband did. And, her parents-in-law kept leaving ensigns on the coffee table when they would come and visit, right? Just that idea, like, I just got to get you to think the way we think. And of course, because they could track that, they would not ever, pick it up or read it because they didn't want the condescension in it, right? And so, um, right, we can all do this. We can all be like this. If I can just get you to see it the right way, see it my way, then we're all going to be a lot better. But as human as this is, right, and as human as it is to say you need to think like me, or we reduce them if they don't, um, we're not doing what Christ has asked us to do, which is to love one another, to understand one another, to value one another. The truth is, as different as we all seem on some level, we are much more like each other than we're different. If we had grown up in the family, in the body, in the experience of somebody that we do not understand, we would very likely think very similarly to them, right? They think what they think for a reason, right? It doesn't mean that they're getting it all right or that you're getting it all right, but there is a reason for why they feel or believe or desire what they do. And so we have to hold on to the fact that we're much more like each other than we're different. Daryl Davis is an accomplished blues musician who is African American, and he years ago was the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, and I can't remember how he first met him, but he saw this. He's like, "How can you hate me when you don't even know me?" was Daryl Davis's question, right? And his story is a remarkable one because he has gotten to know members of the Ku Klux Klan, and I think he's collected over 400 uniforms. I'm not sure what to call it, but like basically over 400 members of the Ku Klux Klan who have left it through Daryl Davis building a relationship with them. And the way he did it was not going in and trying to preach to them to get them to think the correct way, but to get to know them and to let them know him. And as they could connect to each other's humanity, right? The ideology no longer made any sense. It fell away. What was truer emerged. Our faith is a relational faith. Christ teaches us the most important thing is loving one another. Ideology is secondary to it. It all follows from love. And so we use our ideology to love. That's when it's in the right direction. And loving is difficult. Loving means challenging our egos, right? But it means reaching across to understand and care about a person because they're another child of God, even if they're walking in a different experience in a different life, and to reach for that part of them that you can relate to and understand. Daryl Davis, he talks about the fact we all want the same 5 things, he says. We want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And we want the same things for our family that others want for theirs. right? So we all have that basic core need. And I think often when those needs are not being met, that's when our ideas get particularly um, misguided, because those core issues aren't being addressed, right? And so we get more desperate, or we can move into more hateful ideas. Um, so it's looking to see the basic humanity in others that we have in ourselves. And, um, this is what Christ was teaching us to do. Christ spoke against the Sadducees and the Pharisees because they were so interested in making themselves superior to others, right? And that we do this. I mean, we can even be like, oh, yeah, the Sadducees and Pharisees, they're losers, right? Without seeing it in ourselves, that we do this too. We can see ourselves as better than others, or less than others for that matter, without seeing the truth that we are all beloved and we're all part of the body of Christ. The woman caught in adultery, right? Christ is saying everyone wants to cast a stone at her. Why? Right? Because we want to establish that even in our own minds, that we are not like her, that she is bad, that she's less than, that the evil is outside of us. It's them that's evil, rather than the wickedness is inside all of us. Okay, we're all capable of evil, as is the goodness. We're all capable of good too. But we have to be really careful not to pretend that it exists in others and to elevate ourselves, because it interferes with our ability to love and understand, and it also distorts our own understanding of what's true inside of us. We're all capable of good and evil, and we're all capable of hurting each other. The only meaningful thing we can do is deal with the wickedness inside of us. That's what allows us to make a difference, is attending to our own ability to hate. Like Daryl Davis could have been hateful in return, certainly, to be confronted with so much abject hatred. But he instead found the part of him that wanted to love, that wanted to care, that wanted to reach across and speak to the humanity in this other person that didn't respect the humanity in Daryl. And in the courage to do that, he changed hearts by, I don't even know that they necessarily came to the same ideology, but it allowed a meaningful change and evolution to happen through just connecting to the humanity in one another. So recognizing our own ability to be hateful and channeling our courage to love, right? It keeps us from doing divisive and destructive things in our relationships and to one another. And it also helps us become wiser, right? It helps us grow in our understanding of what is true. It helps us be more able to account for the diversity of experience and why some might struggle in some walks of life, and why people may think as they do. And so the way we going back to the Einstein idea, the way that we bring our functioning up is through more truth. Like any company or organization that works really well is seeking to have more truth. Really good leaders are looking for the perspective that's not being brought to the table because somebody's too quiet or too self-doubting to say it, but has a perspective that the organization needs to function well, right? We can easily go like, oh, yeah, that's the right idea, kind of reinforce each other. And yet there can be perspectives that don't come forward that the group needs. I think it was Jung who said, that which we most need is hiding in places we least want to look. Sometimes I say to couples when I'm working with them, like there was one couple where he really liked the idea that he had the answers about what his wife needed for their sexual relationship to be better. And he was so busy telling her how it should be that nothing was changing. And, this is not a shocking perspective, what I'm going to say, but I'm like, look, the information you need to solve your relationship resides in your wife. Like she has the information that you need to both grow yourself up and to grow your relationship up. And you're so busy putting yourself above her that what you need, what your soul needs, you keep cutting off at the source, right? And we do this easily. I do this easily. I mean, this is very, very human to not want the growing pains of more truth and more information. So, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen R. Covey said one of his principles is seek first to understand, then be understood. Right? This is a very simple idea, but very hard to do. Very simple to say, very hard to do. Um, so listening to one another, really understanding someone who is different than us is really tough stuff. So I'm just going to ask this question and maybe look in the chat if that works. I'll be able to access the chat. Is that right? If I do that? Okay. So why is it so difficult to listen to each other? Just write in the chat. What is your perspective on why it's so hard to listen to someone who thinks differently than you or who is upset with you? Let's see what people are saying. Pride. Yes, I loved his talk at your story. Yeah, it was really good. Pride, because I want to be heard more than I want to hear them. Totally. Especially when we've got the right idea. Yes, I need to be right to protect myself. Excellent. Good. Any other thoughts about this? Good. Sometimes, okay, I'm sorry. Pull back. Sometimes their perspective just seems so foreign. Yes. You don't want to get hurt. Yes. Pain is pain at not being heard in return. Good. Yes. Um, it's hard when they don't feel the pain I'm feeling about something. Yes. Sometimes they say things that are hurtful and I feel like I can't let them stand. Yeah. I'm working to care for the reaction of the traumatized girl inside me. Yes. History with the person not believing things will change. History with a person not, yes. Because they 10% they get right stings. Good. And the 90% they get wrong feels unjust. Definitely. Exactly. Which is really valuable point, Ashley, which is the 10% that's there that's true hurts. Like, you know, it might be true about you if you focus on it, but then you're also reeling from the 90% that get wrong, which also hurts. So it's very, very easy to go and just focus on that 90% to fend it off and to get, and to be upset about them seeing you the wrong way. But it's also a way to get away from the information that the relationship actually needs, even if poorly delivered. We're afraid by listening, we're agreeing. I agree with that, right? We're afraid if I just listen to it, then somehow that's going to become the reality. And then my perspective is just going to get drowned out. Where if I just get in there and start explaining to them, but what I'm trying to say is, and a lot of times we call ourselves listening because we're not talking, but we're not actually listening. We're gearing up for how we're going to take down what they just said, which is very different than listening. Julie says, when I don't agree, I get judgmental and it scares me. Yeah. I want to be understood. Yes, we do. Ego. We think we're right. Yes. We perceive that we hear through the filter of what we want to hear. It's easy to put our biased interpretive spin on what we hear them say. Yeah, exactly. So good. I mean, you're all getting at why it's so challenging. It's just hard to have someone saying things that are hurtful, that are sometimes inflated and wrong, and sometimes mixed in there things that are true enough that we don't want to deal with, right? That we don't want to see about ourselves. And so it's not at all surprising because natural man takes over and we go in and we're like, yeah, but I know this thing about you and I can see this thing about you and you're so wrong about this. And the thing is, we're often right about what we're saying in return about the other person. But now you have two speakers and no listeners. You have nobody who's trying to actually open up their perspective. They're so busy trying to defend theirs that nothing happens. John Gottman talks about the fact that couples will fight about the same things for the entire length of their marriage. And that's because, in my opinion, people will always have very consistent differences, but a growing couple, those things are become less and less pain points because the couple starts growing in their maturity. They start growing in their ability to accommodate more of what's true. When a couple's kind of fighting at the same level for the full, 50 years of their marriage, they don't want to let the marriage teach them anything. The relationship, they refuse to let it grow them up. And so they just keep thinking, I'm going to finally prove it to this person and dominate this conversation. And as normal as it is to desire that, okay, by normal, I mean, it's very natural of us to want that it works against finding any real peace, any real bridge of understanding. And so when I teach my courses, I'm always teaching people the way out of this struggle is going towards it, not away from it, not pulling the rope, to fight it. You're going towards understanding the other person and calming yourself down while you do that. Okay. Not easy. Okay. It's not easy, but it's exercising precisely the muscle we need to love each other. And that muscle is, I'm going to care about you more than defending my ego. I'm going to care about you and your whacked perspective more than me proving myself and my whacked perspective. Okay. What I mean is, I'm going to love you enough to understand you. When I was a freshman in college, I was living in Heritage Halls. There were 6 of us as roommates. And one of my roommates, I think now looking back, was on the autism spectrum. I think she had Asperger's syndrome. At the time, I had no concept of that at all, but she would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And she would talk so much that nobody would ever listen to her. And I think she was quite isolated and quite anxious. And she was really hard to listen to because it was more kind of a self-stimulating thing to talk than it was an attempt to truly communicate and connect. I remember I was taking a course that semester. It was like on the art of loving or something. It was something to that effect. It wasn't quite the name of it, but you had to choose a project to do something loving for the semester. And my project that I came up with is that I wanted to really listen to my roommate and really understand her. And at first it was quite difficult. Like I would just be listening and her thoughts would sort of spin and not really go anywhere. But the more I really was seeking to understand, and I would say, can you just explain that to me a little more? Like, can you explain like why that was hard for you or what it was about that? I would take something she was saying and just really try to go understand it better. And what was so striking about it was that her thoughts started to get more organized. She started to slow down her speech. She started to open up to me more. And I started to like her a lot, like a lot. Like I started to connect to her humanity and felt a lot of compassion for her just through the act of really trying to care about this person that was easy to dismiss. And so listening to each other is a powerful form of love. And I know she felt cared about, right? It wasn't ever really spoken directly. It was just felt. We started to build a friendship. And so it's a powerful thing to do. And it's one thing to just understand somebody's experience, right? Which is loving in and of itself. I think it's an entirely different level to understand somebody who sees us in a way we don't want to see ourselves, or who sees the world in a way that we don't want to see the world, right? Because then it's not just about extending ourselves towards another, like I was doing with my roommate. It's about challenging our view of ourselves in the world. And we tend to anchor into that to hold our sense of self, and we're opening it up to change. But when we will do it, we start to get the beam out of our eye. We start to see better. So several years ago, my adolescent son was really struggling, and I wanted him to not be struggling. It panicked me the ways that he was struggling. And so he would start to tell me where he was having difficulty, and I would rush in with the answers. Okay, well, just like do it. Don't do that. Don't think that. Think it like this. You do this. Don't do that. Okay. I mean, I I would just be kind of quickly trying to get in there and get him to think the right way. Okay. And one day he said to me, "Mom, you're a terrible listener." Okay. And I was like, "What do you mean? I'm a professional listener." A lot of people tell me I'm a good listener, okay? And the fact is, I was a terrible listener with my son. First of all, if he was somebody else's son, I would have been a pretty good listener because it wouldn't panic me as much because, I'd be more able to see the goodness in this kid and goodness of what he's trying to figure out. And gosh, I wish your parents would listen to you more. When it's your own child, like it scared me because it scared me to see where he was stuck, and it scared me to not be able to control it away. And it, and so that fear was understandable, but paradoxically, perhaps it was a failure in love in those moments. It's not that he didn't matter to me. It's that my own anxiety and my own need to feel in control was overriding the responsibility I had to know him and to understand him and to walk with him through the dark period he was going through. And so it meant to love him was to tolerate what I didn't have control of. It also meant tolerating seeing myself through his eyes. And it meant tolerating knowing him and caring about him while recognizing that he was going to be the one to make those choices in his life, that I wasn't going to be able to make them for him. And so in after he gave me this feedback and I really started thinking about how much my anxiety was kind of overriding the basic responsibility to really care about him and know him through the difficult time he was having, I just made a commitment to just really calm myself down and to listen and to understand. And when I did that, I would say 4 important things happened in that process. So, first of all, I began to understand better where he was getting stuck, what he couldn't get sorted out, and why my quote unquote answers were not at all answers for him. Right. So, because just really understanding him better, it made more sense to me why he was stuck in the ways he was stuck. It also pushed me to understand myself better, right? To see how I was impacting him through some of my behavior or my responses to him, or what he could track about me and my desires, and how it was impacting his sense of himself. And so it was pushing me to grow as well as a person. Um, in listening to him, I think it helped him sort out his own thinking more because there was more of a sounding board that was not going in and judging and redirecting, but just listening. And then the fourth thing is that he was ultimately more receptive to my perspectives if I offered them. And because they were coming out of a stronger place when I did offer, seek first to understand, then be understood, I would sometimes say, well, I may be wrong, but I wonder if, given what you're saying, if this would be helpful to you. Uh, because he felt understood, because he knew I wasn't just trying to control it, because he could feel my investment in him figuring out his way, then he was receptive to what he didn't yet understand or what might be helpful to him. And so this is always the pathway. Now, children are different from spouses or neighbors or other important people, right? But the same holds true in these relationships. That is, what can I learn from this person? who thinks differently than me, who sees the world differently, who sees me differently than I see myself. Why do they believe or disbelieve as they do? Or what experiences are they having that makes this make sense to them? And how does their world make sense? And what does my spouse, child, friend who disagrees with me understand about me and or my beliefs that I prefer not to see or that I prefer to dismiss? Right? And so these are courageous questions that allow us to love and know the other person, to connect to them, to care about them, and to grow our own understanding up, right? Love leads the way into wisdom. So, if we're going to go into a conversation with someone that we think differently from, and acting like we know how things really are and we need to teach them, we're going to only be met with resistance and anger, right? We have to go into any conversation with some genuine humility, some genuine openness, that we have to see them as people first, right? People much like us, who, and to have the humility to think I would probably think or believe as they do if I'd had the same experiences that they have. And so, how can I reach to the humanity in the other and to understand them and to care about them? As Daryl Davis says, when people are talking, they're not fighting. And he reminds us that we don't have to agree with people about their ideology. We don't have to respect their ideas, but we do have to respect people's right to say it and their humanity, their shared, our shared humanity. You can always find something to like and appreciate in another person. And when we connect with that part of people, it binds us together. It allows us to, better appreciate and work together in the face of the differences, and to work better as a society, as a community, as a group. And so this really is what builds honest bridges. So, I just want to end this before I open it up for some questions, just to make a quick reference to my mom, who just was such an example to me of caring about people more than ideology. She was a woman who could reach across political division, ideology. I mean, my parents were kind of amazing that way. We would have people sitting at our dinner table that would be across the spectrum of human experience. And my parents just were really good at just caring about human beings. And even though they were often friends with people that were quite different than they were, and they just seemed very good at seeing the humanness. Um, and I think that really was just a powerful thing, because when we love another person for the core of who they are, well, we change them. I mean, and and we change ourselves. We open up for honest conversations. We open up respect. We open up the ability to better understand each other and to create solutions that create a collective uh, reality that's good for all of us. So my hope is for all of us, or the way we can have more hope, is to think about who's somebody that I don't understand, that I roll my eyes at quietly, that I think is just, so different. And can I make a commitment to just reach towards them more, understand them more, instead of like we're just not going to have conversations because we just don't get each other. Instead, to understand their lives, to understand their experiences, even to ask, can you tell me more about why that feels true or important to you? How have you come to that decision? What what do you think it would solve this political position or something like that? Why do you believe this thing in the church or not believe it? Right? To seek to understand, not so that you can pounce on it, critique it, but to genuinely understand, how does this person operate in the world? And if you love them for it and you care about them, again, you don't have to agree with them, but you do have to respect people's ability and to have a different decision and their humanity, the way that they are like you. People will feel it, and it will increase their receptiveness to you and their respect for you. You'll be more able to come to a shared understanding and a wiser understanding for your courage to love and to reach out to other people. So that's my hope for all of us, that in this divided time, we can really take it upon ourselves to reach out to the people around us, care about them, care about their humanity, believe in their basic decency, even in all the difference, and let them feel that you see that in them, because it will make a difference for both of you. So with that, I open up to any questions that anybody would like to ask.
Thank you so much. We did have a couple people submit questions beforehand.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I'm looking in the comments real quick. Um, but we'll go ahead and ask one of those
Sure.
while we see. She said, some people struggle to hold on to their own opinions in the face of pushback, while others really dig in their heels and become quite strident or condescending about their own opinions.
Yeah.
How do we find the right balance of holding strong to our convictions without being stubborn or superior?
Yeah, you don't have to ever go into superior, and you don't have to go into stubborn. So superior is a reactive move, like I'm just going to think I'm better than you, which is kind of a shortcut. It's like a way of getting out of the struggle. And stubborn is like, it's more reactive, like I'm just going to dig in because I don't want to challenge my view. And so they're both weak positions. But what I would say is, you also don't want to just throw your ideas away to keep everybody happy with you. What it is to be humble is to be open minded. And you can be open to understanding another person's perspective, why they think that way, without having to prove your perspective. Okay. So you can say, well, tell me why you think this, or how have you come to that conclusion? Um, you are not trying to get them to understand your point of view as much as you can use what they are saying to figure out if you still hold to your view. Has their point of view allowed your view to evolve or not? Right. So we get into a struggle when we feel like we have to prove our point of view or get someone else to agree with it, then we're toast. And that isn't the goal in a relationship. A goal is to have integrity in our view within ourselves. And we increase the integrity of our view by being willing to be open to where we're wrong, but not because we need someone else to agree with us or like us or think we're not dumb, but we're using how they see the world to take a look at how we see the world to make sure it is true enough for our integrity. I don't know if that makes sense. So, um, this is just one example, but I remember, I remember in like 2020 when there was so much political division, and I was kind of pushing into like one idea and kind of rejecting another perspective. And my husband, who really does think like me, but is very good at articulating the perspective of the underdog or the alternative perspective. And so I remember we were on a bike ride and he kept saying, Jennifer, but you're being too dismissive of this perspective. And because it scared me, I was just like trying to like defend it and say, no, it's the wrong idea. It's the wrong idea. I'm not particularly proud of this, but and I remember like by the end of the bike ride, I remember like putting my bike into the garage and I was like, I just think you're right. I think it just terrifies me that you're right. It terrifies me because I'm afraid of that perspective. And But once I settled down, what was happening, I wasn't saying you're right because I wanted my husband to like me. It's because my own conscience knew that I was afraid of something, and so I was just pushing it away reactively. But there was a truth in it that I really needed to integrate into my view of the world and the population. And so and it really helped me get wiser, I think, and it helped me be more fair to people. But I only came to it by understanding another point of view. And so my point of view changed. No, at first I was just trying to get my husband to see my point of view and reject the one he was trying to offer. uh, but it's we're using it to get our own point of view clearer.
Thank you. How do we tolerate and navigate situations where someone has a perspective that we believe to be harmful to others?
Yeah. Well, there's not a lot we can do sometimes, right? Like we have to kind of recognize our powerlessness in a way. I mean, I don't mean to say it like that we can't do anything, but if we think we have to get somebody to see things the right way, we're going to be first of all, we're going to be trying to control something we can't control. And we're going to be in a kind of hateful position towards them while we're trying to get them to change. What you're trying you can't hate someone into loving more. And so I find, I often feel like in church meetings, so on, I see things differently than a lot of people around me. If I've tried to get people to see it the right way, that's never gone well. uh, what I think works much better is to say, for me, that's a hard position because I think it's hurtful for these reasons, right? It is, for me, not an acceptable idea because of A, B, and C. So you can share how you see the world. You can share why you don't believe something or you do believe it, but you're not, how to say it, you're sharing your honest view of the elephant, okay? And you're holding it with dignity, okay? But you're also not trying to say you have to see it this way too, and I've got to get you to see it this way because you will only find resistance. But when you offer sincere experience, genuine experience, that moves people.
Politics has divided my family so much. How do we navigate? Do we just avoid until after the election?
Mm, it's tough. It's really tough stuff. Um, yeah, it might mean that you don't talk about politics per se, but you reach across to the other person and you care about them. And you say, you can say, we see this differently and I love you. We have strong feelings about this and you matter most to me. And you see things as you do, probably for very good reasons, as do I. And that's okay. And I love you. Because remember, we want to belong, we want to be respected, right? We want to feel that we belong. So if we can attend to that, it makes the rest just get much less um, divisive and hurtful. A lot of what's happened in the last 8 years is there's just been so much contempt for the other side, right? For the different point of view, and the contempt breeds more contempt. And the inability to kind of collaborate or concede drives more inability to collaborate and concede. And so if you can just reach across and say, like, I see you and I love you, and it just softens the rest and opens people up to each other. So, and letting go of the idea that I'm going to convince anybody. Just listen. Mm-hmm.
I love that. This last one, I think we'll just make this to be the last so that we
Mm-hmm.
respect everybody's time. But it kind of goes along with that. What do you do with a person who refuses to be known, even when you reach out to them?
Mm. Yeah. Well, to be known is scary for some people, right? Many of us are good at giving superficial pictures of ourselves or not really letting somebody in. that it's still just being someone that cares. I mean, people get to decide if they're going to let somebody in and take the risk of letting someone matter to them. But you can always choose to love and to care and to show that you care. And and that's all you have control over, but it's not a small thing. Um and so, loving is really powerful stuff. It can feel so meaningless sometimes, and yet it can have such a profound impact. I was I wrote a text to someone in my family about 6 months ago, and just today they wrote me back and said, "I want you to know when you sent this to me, it meant so much to me, and I've held on to it and I've gone back to it, and I just wanted you to know I really appreciate you sending that." Okay, just like and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even remember writing it." And they were just saying like I've kept going back to that text. I I remember being in a grocery store when I was completely overwhelmed with a special needs child and feeling judged by people because he was screaming and all, and I just remember this cashier just reached over and touched my hand because I wasn't looking at anybody. I was just trying to kind of cope. And she just said, "You're doing such a good job," or something like that. "You're doing a good job." And I've thought about that a million times because it was so kind. It's just a small moment, but she just reached and touched me and said that to me. And I needed it so much in that moment. And I was so overwhelmed. And I assumed so much judgment. And this was just that I see you. And, that was 10 seconds of her time, and it still can make me tear up sometimes. Okay. So what we do to care about each other is so powerful, and we can never forget that. And we can't make people think the way we think or do what we want them to do, but we can love them. We can care about them. And that moves people closer together. It builds understanding, it builds the ability to collaborate. And that's what we need as a society to thrive. And we need it always. So just think about, how can I love this other person? How can I do something that really, not to prove to them I love them, just to love them, to care about them. And that's what God wants from us and for us, because it blesses our souls when we do it, and it makes us feel more hope.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I just have a much better understanding of not only why we need to be reconnecting with others, with some people that maybe we have been a bit estranged from, but how we what changes I can make personally to make it possible. And that really matters to us here at MWEG, because we believe that our relationships are not only just the greatest source of our personal happiness, but they're also key to living in a peaceful and productive society.
Hmm.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to turn the time over to Jen Thomas to close us out. She's MWEG's co-executive director, and she's also co-host of our popular podcast, Proclaim Peace. She's just going to let everyone know how they can access more great events like we've enjoyed tonight. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Lisa. I think one of the things, as I've just sat here, this has been a very calming conversation for me, and it has also been, for me, caused some self-reflection, and it's asked me, I think, to be a better person, which I actually very much appreciate. And I think it's a really good introduction to one of the unique ways that MWEG is trying to, air quotes, do politics, which is, our whole aim is to not only care for the world, but to try to, in other words, to try to do a better job of caring for God's children. But we also are trying so hard to do it in a way that is caring for the women who are participating in that process. Many other political organizations don't really care about the people that work with them, and they just want to get something out of them and get something done. But at MWEG, it's our hope that every time we invite you into a community to accomplish something together, that you will leave a little bit more whole, having learned something about yourself, stronger, better, and rather than being diminished, to be a better version of yourself. And we hope that if you are not already a member of MWEG, that you will consider joining us. Not only are we able to give you access to wonderful events like tonight, but by joining with us in community, you're able, even just by adding your names to our rolls, to be able to help influence things for good. The more women we have, the more heft we have behind our statements and our meetings and our collaborations. So we hope you will consider staying connected with us. You can follow us very easily on @MormonWEG online, where on our Instagram account, you'll find really top-notch tips for staying informed and grounded in what is proving to be a pretty contentious election season. We're going to be launching a new campaign next month that's designed specifically to help all of us face the upcoming election with confidence, compassion, and joy, and to know that we can participate according to our conscience and to our integrity in ways that will help improve the world. You can sign up for one of our free weekly newsletters or just jump right in and become a member. Membership is easy. You just give us your name, your email, and a way to connect you to a state and where you live so that we can reach out to you with opportunities. Most importantly, we hope you will join us on our app, which is a community where people can gather to dialogue and discuss. MWEG is a group of women with a really wide range of political beliefs, and we practice daily what Jennifer has just shared with us. We are all committed to President Nelson's call to be peacemakers now and always. Together, we're trying to do politics differently, and we're going to put the links to everything I've just shared in the comments, so we hope you'll grab it before we go. As we close, I just want to say thanks again so much to Dr. Finlayson-Fife. She is just an extraordinary gift of a human. And like I said, every time I hear her, I not only feel that I have accessed the capacity to do better, but I feel like I've sort of been called to do the work myself rather than just to call out other people around me. So we really are so appreciative of the fact that she gave us her time tonight, and just see it as a manifestation of her dedication to building a more connected and peaceful world. Thank you to all of you for showing up and engaging with this, for your comments. This has been a really, really wonderful evening. So we just want to thank you for being with us and say good night.